Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. A very warm welcome to each of you, wherever you're calling from today in the world. My name is Kate Oren. I'm Senior Gender Program Manager with IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature. And on behalf of the whole team here and our partners at USAID, thank you so much for your time and your interest to join us here today in this webinar. Before we continue, please do take a moment to note that, as our webinar title suggests, this webinar will discuss issues relating to many expressions, intersecting forms of violence, which may be uncomfortable, unsettling, and triggering for some. Here in this webinar series, we do aim to create a safe space to discuss these challenging topics that pervade our societies and limit our work. We do encourage you, the participant and listener, to please take care. To those just continuing to sign on now, a very warm welcome and thanks again for joining us. Before we kick things off, a few virtual housekeeping matters, as always, to run through. First, please be aware that this session is being recorded and it will be available on our agent webpage in 3 languages. Microphones will be kept in the mute mode. This is just to minimize connectivity issues, but your active participation is warmly encouraged, please, via the chat box in the control panel, probably on the right-hand side of your screen. Please share your comments, your observations, and your questions as they occur to you throughout the session in these chat boxes. The facilitators on the back end will be collecting and organizing these comments and questions continuously to factor into the Q&A later. We have key resources in the handout box in the control panel, also on the right. Here you'll find easy access to hyperlinks and PDFs to resources. These are also all on our website. And if you have any issues at all, please feel free to reach out to our wonderful gender team colleagues behind the scenes here. We'll be keeping a close eye on the chat boxes to manage any communications, troubleshoot if you have any issues. I want to offer them a big thanks for all of their efforts, and in particular to our USAID partners who make this session and all of our sessions in this series possible. Today's speakers will be participating in English, but we do have simultaneous translation in both Spanish and French. So to listen to the webinar in your preferred language, please download the application called Interactio from the Apple Store or Google Play Store. When you open that, you're going to need to enter the event code GBV-ENV, and remember to turn down or mute this meeting so that you can hear the live translation clearly. And we do recommend using headphones. That's usually the clearest usage. The registration email that you received also includes these instructions on how to join. We're going to show you a quick demo here in a minute. And again, if you have any questions accessing the translation, please, in many languages, we have some support behind the scenes here. Just reach out to us via the chat panel. So this little live video is showing you how to access Interactio if you need it. Great, hopefully you're all set up. Today's webinar session is part of a series that aims to build awareness, strategies, and community to better understand and address gender-based violence and environment linkages. As some of you may have joined past sessions, you may know that IUCN and USAID together are prioritizing attention to gender-based violence and environment links through our partnership agent, Advancing Gender in the Environment, which aims to strengthen gender-responsive environmental programming and leverage environmental efforts for gender equality outcomes. Agent supports this webinar series to share knowledge, build community, and an effort to continuously learn from a wide range of cross-sector partners and collaborations and practitioners from around the world to be able to gather strategies and spotlight promising practices. We are gathering this learning and curating a space for sharing new knowledge, strategies, dedicated tools, and community and collaboration in our Gender-Based Violence and Environment Linkages Center, a direct link for which you'll find also in the chat box. The GBV Environment Center focuses on knowledge and tools, influencing policy and programming, providing tailored technical support to a wide range of projects and efforts across sectors, and forging cross-sector cooperation and practice, including building on promising practices emerging around the world. And that leads us back to the purpose of today's discussion. Today's session is unique from our other series webinars in that this is a kind of spotlight conversation through which we are going to get to know one project, one biodiversity and climate resilience project, including and in particular how and why they develop strategies to tackle GBV and what their impacts suggest. We are so fortunate to welcome speakers representing the organizations that have led the Hariyo Ban Program in Nepal. Now, before we go on, I'd like to ask, please, for your very quick but important input. If you would kindly answer a quick question for us via this poll. We would like to know from you on a scale of 1 to 5, how you would personally rate your current knowledge on how to work with partners, how to work to address gender-based violence and environment linkages. We use this information to inform the development and evaluation of our webinars. We are going to leave this quick poll open for just about 30 seconds so you can register your responses on your screen, and then we'll look at the results. Just another couple of seconds here. Thank you so much. No pressure. Just click the one that feels right. Okay, great. Interesting breakdown. So I hope we'll have a rich discussion with those of you who indeed have some knowledge and familiarity with these issues. Okay, so just a quick reminder for anybody who might be signing on now. Again, a warm welcome. Thanks for being here. And if you need translation live in French or Spanish, please go to Interactio. I won't go through the instructions here, but if you need support, please reach out via the chat box. So we're so pleased now to turn to our great agenda for today. In just a moment, I'm going to pass the floor to my amazing colleague, Che Shinoy, USAID's Senior Gender-Based Violence Advisor, who will be moderating this discussion with the Hariyo Ban team. But let me offer some introductions, and then I'll turn the floor over to you, Che. So first in our speaker lineup here, we have Judy Oglethorpe. And Judy is now the Senior Director for Innovative Conservation Approaches in WWF. But for 5 years, she was Chief of Party of the USAID-supported Hariyo Ban Program, or Green Forests, in Nepal. Before going to Nepal, she held various positions at WWF, directing the Climate Adaptation Unit, the People and Conservation Unit, Ecoregion Support Unit, and Biodiversity Support Program, and working in climate adaptation, health, population, livelihoods, armed conflict and environment, transboundary natural resource management, and large-scale conservation. Prior to WWF, Judy worked for 14 years in Southern and East Africa in protected area planning and management, forest and wildlife conservation, community-based natural resource management, and tourism planning. She holds degrees in environmental management and ecological science. Then we have Manorama Sunawar, who's Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Coordinator at CARE for the Hariyo Ban Program, where she started in 2019. Before this, she was a gender specialist in UNDP Suriname, looking after gender affairs in the Global Climate Change Alliance project. She has more than 15 years of experience in the development sector with focus on gender equality and social inclusion, Indigenous people's rights, environment, and peace building with NGOs and UN agencies. She holds joint master's degrees in conflict, peace, and development studies in Nepal and Sri Lanka. Bharati Patek is currently working as the chairperson of Federation of Community Forest Users in Nepal. She's worked for more than 25 years in the sector of community forestry rights in the country, and she has a master's graduate degree in rural development. And finally, we have Prakash Lamsal, Joint Secretary of the Ministry of Forests and Environment, who's currently Chief of Planning, Monitoring, and Coordination Division and spokesperson for the ministry. A forester by background, he worked in Nepal's Forest Service for more than 3 decades in different capacities, as District Forest Officer, Planning Officer at the Department of Forests and Ministry of Forest and Environment, Project Manager of a landscape program, Provincial Forest Director in Gandaki Province, and Chief Executive Officer of Nepal Ban Nigam. His experience includes conservation extension, designing and planning landscape level participatory integrated conservation and climate change adaptation projects, and work with multiple stakeholders in the field of forestry, biodiversity, climate change adaptation, and REDD. He has a Master's of Science degree in Forestry Extension from the University of Reading. So I hope I've convinced you we have incredible expertise to shape this discussion. And with that, I turn it over to you, Che.
Thank you so much, Kate. Really, really excited to be here and to be having a meaningful conversation around the intersection of gender-based violence and environmental programming. So you all just heard the rich biographies of our colleagues here on today's webinar. I want each of them to give me 3 words that describe their background so that we can get to know them better and to really have a conversation in a more meaningful way. So I'm going to start off with Judy, then I'll go to Manorama, Bharati, and Mr. Lamsal.
Hi, Che, thank you. 3 words, I would say happy, forward-looking, and optimistic. Thank you.
That's great, Judy, thanks. Manorama.
Hello, Che. 3 words to describe myself would be, I'm introvert person and highly intuitive and fun-loving. Thank you.
Thank you, Manorama. Bharati.
So I'm saying to the 3 words. One is the community, and another is the rights, and next is the equality. Yeah.
Very much so. Thank you, Bharati. And Mr. Lamsal.
Yes, I like to call myself a connector, which connects people together. And I'm a forestry student and ordinary civil servant.
Thank you. Those are really great adjectives. For me, my 3 words are sensitive, intuitive, and loving. So I'm very much looking forward to getting to know our presenters today. I'm actually going to hand over the floor to Judy and Manorama to tell us the story of Hariyo Ban.
Thank you, and hello, everybody. So we're very excited to be able to tell you about the Hariyo Ban program today. Hariyo Ban means green forests in Nepali, and the name of the program is an abbreviation for a saying in Nepal: the green forests are the wealth of Nepal. The program is funded by the United States Agency for International Development. Could I have the next slide, please? So the goal of Hariyo Ban is to increase ecological and community resilience in 2 biodiverse landscapes in Nepal. The main components are biodiversity conservation and climate adaptation, with themes that cut across these 2 main components on gender and social inclusion, which we call GESI in Nepal, and you'll hear a lot of the speakers saying GESI, governance, and market-based livelihoods. And the program has been running for nearly 10 years now. It started in 2011 and it will come to an end this year. Next slide, please. So this program is implemented by a consortium of World Wildlife Fund, Care Nepal, the Federation of Community Forest Users Nepal, and the National Trust for Nature Conservation. So it has 2 conservation and 2 development NGOs, and 2 international NGOs and 2 national NGOs, which we found is a really valuable balance. The program works with forest-dependent local communities and indigenous peoples in the key parts of 2 landscapes. The government of Nepal is a very important partner at different levels. We work closely with USAID, as well as with many civil society organizations, the private sector, and academic institutions. Next slide, please. So Hariyo Ban works in 2 large landscapes, covering about 40% of the country. The Chitwan Annapurna landscape is an amazing, spectacular area. It covers the whole of the Gandaki River Basin in Nepal. So it's reaching from the high peaks of Annapurna, Langtang, and Manaslu at over 8,000 meters, all the way down to the Indian border in the south, which is just a few hundred meters above sea level, with very spectacular scenery. And wildlife in this area in the mountains includes the snow leopard and red panda. The Tarai Arc in the lowlands was established to conserve rhino and tiger by connecting protected areas through corridors within Nepal and also to protected areas in India. There are several million people who live in the 2 landscapes, and many rural people here are very dependent on the local forests for their livelihoods and for their security. Next slide, please. So the theory of change of Hariyo Ban is, if stakeholders are better able to conserve and benefit from biodiverse natural resources and adapt to climate change in a manner that diversifies livelihood options, improves gender equality and social inclusion, and promotes good natural resource governance, then people and ecosystems in the target landscapes will be more resilient. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the main components of the project. The biodiversity component works to conserve species and ecosystems by tackling the major threats to them. So approaches include, for example, promoting alternative energy to tackle overharvesting of firewood, promoting environmentally sound infrastructure to reduce the impacts of poorly designed roads and other infrastructure on wildlife and ecosystems and communities, building capacity and holding campaigns to reduce poaching and illegal trade in wildlife. Nepal, lying in between India and China, is a illegal wildlife trade route. And then we also work to find solutions to human-wildlife conflict, recognizing that people living in the landscapes sometimes suffer severe problems from wildlife conflict. So we work to resolve that. And then we also work to restore wildlife species in protected areas where they have disappeared. The livelihoods component builds skills in poor forest-dependent people to enhance their employment opportunities and promote market-based enterprises in forest and agriculture, working to reduce unsustainable pressure on forests. So one example is a group of Dalit women who were previously cutting firewood unsustainably from a forest in an important corridor. The project helped them to develop a bead making enterprise, making clay beads, which are traditional beads, and they're now selling those in Kathmandu and Pokhara, making enough money to educate their children and feed their family as well. And they no longer are dependent on the forest for firewood. Okay, next slide, please. So the climate adaptation component identifies climate risks for people and species and ecosystems in protected areas, and it works with stakeholders to build resilience to climate change. Some of the main community adaptation approaches are things like restoring forests on steep slopes and other measures to reduce the risk of landslides and floods, which are happening more frequently because of the more intense rainfall with climate change. At the same time, we're improving watershed management along with water supplies and irrigation and promoting climate smart agriculture to reduce the impacts of drought. Women and poor and marginalized people are often disproportionately vulnerable to climate change. And so the program focuses on building their resilience to climate change in particular. And then to build the resilience of species and ecosystems, our activities include increasing landscape connectivity so that species can move within landscapes in response to climate change, so often uphill to cooler and moister places. And then conserving climate refugia and creating replicate populations of threatened species. The governance component works to improve internal governance of community forest groups and facilitates links with local government. And so, for example, this can help communities to leverage funds from local government for climate adaptation and for forest management. The gender and social inclusion GESI component ensures that women and marginalized groups can participate in natural resource management decision making and get their fair share of the benefits from forests. One of the challenges is that some people are excluded from this, and so we're working to overcome this. And the gender-based violence work falls under this component. So I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Manorama to talk more about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy, and hello, everyone. Let me begin with the gender dimension in community forest management in Nepal. So Nepal's community forest is recognized globally as a successful model of decentralized forest management. And in Nepal, 45% of land mass is covered by forests, and out of it, 38% of forest is being managed by community. So women are the greatest contributor in forest management, and also they are also dependent in forests, and not only women, so men also from marginalized background, particularly indigenous people, Dalit communities, Madhesi communities, or Muslim communities, even landless people. But the paradox is these communities or groups are often, excluded from the membership of the community forest. That is, sometimes it's been an issue. And also there are lots of progressive provisions of promoting this marginalized community and women to have access to the community forest, but the level of implementation of these policies are a bit poor, not very effective. Next slide, please. So as for the forms of gender-based violence in Nepal, so at the household level, particularly domestic violence and the psychological violence are more prevalent. For example, woman could be tortured or beaten by her husband for attending meeting in community forest if she step out from the house in some areas. And similarly, at the community level, sexual and economic violence are more prevalent. And for example, women, there are some cases of women, like when they enter in the forest, they got sexually violated or harassed. And there is also practice of unequal pay for the same level of job within the community forest as well. At the societal level, we do have kind of practices in some areas of Nepal, harmful practices and traditions. For example, menstrual stigma. In some forests, in some areas, women are not allowed to enter in the community forest or the forest when they are in the menstrual periods. In worst case scenario, these women are forced to live in isolation, particularly in a state, poorly constructed state. Sometimes it invites human-wildlife conflict because there are some cases that women have been attacked by wild animals during those periods. Next slide, please. So next slide, please. So to Hariyo Ban consider gender-based violence in its program because we had conducted social analysis and gender analysis before beginning the program, and GESI was particular gender-based violence was identified as a key barrier for women to participate effectively in biodiversity conservation and equitable benefit sharing. for the natural resources, and it was also barrier for them to participate in leadership position. Next slide, please. So the program incorporated gender-based violence as one of the gap or issues in the GESI action plan of Hariyo Ban program. So we launched lots of actions, and basically we had two approaches: preventive and responsive measures. Under the preventive measures, we did policy support for the to minimize. For example, we liaised with the Ministry of Forest and Environment in policy support, including like developing gender strategy and action plan of the ministry. And also at the local level, we liaised with, particularly we supported some natural resource management groups, including community forest users group, to develop their internal GESI policy, which addresses gender-based violence also. And also we conducted gender-based violence awareness campaigns, and we trained women leaders for their leadership skills. And for the responding measures, we formed and mobilized Community Learning Action Center. In short, we call it CLAC. CLAC is very famous and popular model. It is being introduced by Care International. So it's a model to empower women and marginalized community. So in Hariyo Ban program, what we did was we not just use this platform to educate women and marginalized community on biodiversity conservation or climate change adaptation, but also we mobilize CLAC, and we facilitate them, these women of the CLAC, to explore their issues, social issues, which are related with the biodiversity conservation and climate change adaptations. So this was one of the important action of Hariyo Ban program. And we also felt like engaging with men and decision maker also key to address gender-based violence, and we did that. And also formation of anti-GBV units within the community forest management groups is also important. So we use this approach as well. Next slide, please. So as for our achievements, we reached to more than 13,000 women directly through CLACs to train them in leadership skill. As a result, it's so good to see that some of them are already in the leadership position of natural resource management and local government. One study indicates that the percentage of women representing in natural resource management group has been increased. Now it's in 50% as it has provisioned in policy. So also the representation of marginalized community and women altogether is 87% now in the Hariyo Ban working area. So that is one of the findings. And besides this, campaign led by this CLAC on harmful practices were so successful that local government also took ownership initiatives to scale them out. For example, our campaign like ending menstrual stigma, it's called Chaupari in far western region, successful that the government, local government also has been designed some programs and based on this experience, and it's being replicated in other areas as well. So and also the story shows that CLAC, along with mobilization of change agent and GESI campaigns and other gender-based violence campaigns, have been effective in reducing gender-based violence at the community, domestic violence particularly, very effective. And also to some extent, it was effective in reducing violence in community and societal level as well. And there are altogether 117 groups, a natural resource management group already formed the anti-GBV committee, though the number is very negligible, but this was piloted. So based on this success, so FECOFUN is taking lead in scaling this out across the country. So it's in their plan. Maybe Bhartiji will talk about it later. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we noticed that there were some enabling factors which made successful in addressing gender-based violence. First one is like livelihood support, which was targeting to women and marginalized group. It was so helpful to not only to raise their income or their access to towards assets and the resources, but also we noted that there was some positive correlation in increasing their income and decreasing the violence against women. So that was one enabling factor we noted. And next one was the GESI policy and GESI policy development support at both at national level and the group level helped to create an enabling environment in addressing gender-based violence. And we strongly believe that it will be helpful to ensure sustainability of GESI and GBV effort in future as well. Yes, next slide. Thank you. Now I think I have come to the end of the slide. Next slide. So we are thankful now. Hariyo Ban is thankful to USAID, and we'd like to say that the content we incorporated in our slide and maybe we are talking, it's not the it's our personal. So it's our personal opinion, and it does not necessarily reflect the views of USAID or US government. With this, I'd like to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Manorama. That's and Judy for the presentation. Manorama, building cooperation and collaboration has been important for this project. What does a partnership look like to tackle these interrelated issues? What were the essential ingredients to making a cross-sector collaboration work? Manorama, we see you talking, but we can't hear you. Are you on mute?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Okay, so thank you, Jay, for this question. Yes, gender-based violence itself is very, sensitive and very complex, and it needs kind of collaboration, particularly for the harmful practices like eliminate harmful practices. So cooperation and collaboration was crucial for tackling these issues, and this included close partnership within the Hariyo Ban consortium team, like with the local communities or implementing partners and key stakeholders, including federal and local government, and also, of course, our donor USAID. So Hariyo Ban was very fortunate to have both development and conservation partners in its consortium. For example, CARE has its expertise in like gender and GBV. So, at the same time, FECOFON itself was an umbrella organization which has above 22,000 of networks of safe uses. And similarly, in conservation sector, WWF is very well known, and NTNC is a semi-government organization which has its presence in the field, and they are closely working with the Department of National Park. So based on this experience and potential of the consortium partners, the roles and responsibility of partners were clearly articulated in the GESI action plan from the designing phase. And we often plan together and collaborate to sit together and reflect the achievement together. So for this, CARE took a responsibility of empowering women and marginalized community, and similarly FECOFON took the responsibility of launching the gender-based violence campaigns and forming anti-GBV units, and WWF and NTNC built on their relationship and trust that they have had with the government agency for many years to bring up these issues. So they conducted orientation session for the government staff and also helped incorporating gender-based violence issues in the GESI strategy. So this is how we worked at the federal level, national level. At the local level, our implementing partners were working, and USAID was the one who had mandated this GESI action plan with GESI analysis. If we didn't have GESI analysis, we didn't know that gender-based violence was one of the gap of our area, and we wouldn't have designed actions to address it. So I do remember one example of eliminating gender-based violence, that of menstrual stigma, banning menstrual stigma, like it's called Saupari practice in Far Western region. So CARE initiated this through implementing partners. They collaborated with the local government and implemented mentoring partner reach out to the the local stakeholder, including traditional healer and the local communities, leaders, and community forest users group. So with the joint effort, we've been able to abolish this practice within the ward, and it is being scaling out, and we are developing one success story also. So we do have those sort of lots of experience and success story, which is coming up soon. So this is how we worked, and collaboration and communications and joint review was a key factor for this success. That is what we believe. Thank you, Jay.
Yeah, thank you, Manorama. That is incredibly insightful. It sounds like really understanding each partner's role and responsibility was a key component, as well as reflection, pause, and planning together. Judy, how has this approach enhanced natural resource access management and sustainability outcomes?
In terms of access, access has been improved for marginalized groups by empowering them to participate. So, for example, Dalits and Haliyas, who are the freed bonded laborers, who were previously excluded from harvesting subsistence resources in forests, are now accepted by the community and are able to harvest in community forests. Management of forests has improved through increased participation, and this is forests, but also watersheds, for example. So with better representation of marginalized people and women, they're able to share more equitably in the benefits from forests, for example, sharing of the income that some community forests generate, as people are empowered to actually claim their rights within the community. And this whole thing is building a stronger sense of ownership and responsibility among the whole community, so that everyone is more motivated to take care of their forests for the future and play a role in doing so. In terms of sustainability, well, promoting this inclusiveness promotes social sustainability. It comes, there's more harmony between the users from different socioeconomic backgrounds within a community, and the strong engagement of a larger group of people who have an interest in how their natural resources are managed, and who are committed to having continued benefits from their forests. And then there's also economic sustainability through livelihoods promotion, which the project has done hand in hand with the governance work and the GESI work. So the market-based forest enterprises give people stronger incentives to manage their forests well. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. The next question is for Bharati. Can you please give us some examples of how the work with women supported improved natural resource use and management?
Thank you, Jay, for your question. So really, you all know is Nepali rural women are very important role playing in the natural resource sector. Is the forest area and water and the land. So especially very important role protecting the natural resource for the active engagement for the rural women in the grassroots level, especially case for the community forest users group. There is the very women-friendly policy in community forest users group. One is the participation, and another is the active engagement in the natural resource management. So many cases with us in the grassroots level in the community forest users group. So especially like community forest resource are supporting to the women livelihood, and the women are supporting to the manage the forest resource. So both are very important linkage to the women's and the grassroots women's and the forest resource. Like we have many example in the community forest users group area. So very supporting role are playing from the Hariyo Ban program. We started to the starting phase and policy making process. So after some time we are taking the role for the how can support to the livelihood for the women through the community forestry resource, and the Hariyo Ban program has improvised the conservation of the very like endangered species like Vijay and the Satisal and the Chap. That is the very important species, very endangered species in the Nepal. So Hariyo Ban program are supporting and empowering the rural women, like a very indigenous women and the very marginalized women who are staying in the forest area and the natural resource managed area. So these plants are gone like got a more economic and healthy and conservation and benefit, and also from the perspective of the ecotourism promotion. So women are directly engaged that area like a plantation. So this is the supporting from the Hariyo Ban program through the community forest users group, and mobilizing the women and active participation the women. Another example of the women, Tharu women in the like Kanchanpur district. This is the just example. We are working the all over the country. We are more focusing to the Hariyo Ban area, other countries, other district and the CFUG. So especially Hariyo Ban program and the community forest users group women, Tharu women in Kanchanpur district have contributed to the established the homestay enterprise. So this is a very traditional practice in there. Indigenous women, Tharu women is the indigenous women who are very aware about the natural resource, and their customary practice there is the like a very traditional practice they are using in there, and this has provided internal and external tourists with the great holiday destination. And Basanti Rana, she is the very active women in community forest users group from the Kanchanpur, has received the conservation award for the effort of the promoting conservation activities. So women lead community forestry, have a lead to community forestry with better governance and the inclusion practice also in there. Those women leaders are most trustworthy and their roles are more inclusive. And many women's like many example with us in the community forest users group. All women are directly engaged in the plant the timber and non-timber forest product, and they are actively engaging in the leadership, and they are playing to the very good role in governance practice and the leadership, increasing the leadership, and they are playing to the multiple role in the community forest users group, and they are looking not in community forest users group, they are looking the all over area. So how can increase the women, how can reduce the like gender-based violence through the community forestry movement. So this is a very good example. We are working and very closely in the grassroots level. So this is the very different cases in the grassroots level through the community forestry users group. We have a community forestry guideline. We are implementing the grassroots level. So community forestry users group and the women's are like starting to the gender policy in the grassroots level. So this is the example, very actively engagement in the natural resource management, like not only forest, and they are playing to the very good role and protect the water and land and the forest, and how can empower to the women through economic empowerment to the grassroots women who are staying, who are very closely like working in the natural resource. So this is the very good practice, and itself FECOFON also playing to the good role, and the USAID supported Hariyo Ban Program also many supporting to the empower the grassroots women. So this is the example in the community forest users group in Nepal.
Thank you, Bharati. That I feel so inspired hearing the experiences that rural women that you're talking about are bringing to, you know, their own empowerment stories. That kind of picks up on the next question that I had for Judy. You know, what incentivizes a conservation climate change project to be addressing gender-based violence?
This is a really good question, and I would have not been able to answer this 10 years ago. So I myself have been on a steep learning curve. So 10 years ago, when USAID designed the first phase of the program, they actually included the GESI cross-cutting component, and also very importantly, a full-time GESI coordinator for the project. And these were really great measures, which don't usually happen in conservation projects. But they gave us the capacity to focus on GESI early on in the first phase. And as we worked on GESI at the beginning, we knew that women were dependent on forests, but were often not having much of a say in how their resources were managed. And sometimes they were not receiving equitable benefits, like, you know, the division of income from forests. And we came to realize that social norms were inhibiting them from taking on leadership roles. We also realized that they were going to have to play a larger role in forest management in the future, because so many men were migrating away from work. And so for all of these reasons, we realized that the project had to play a role to help to empower these women to fully benefit from their forests and manage them and play decision-making roles. And in addition, they also had specific vulnerabilities to climate change that men didn't necessarily have. So for example, they were having to walk further for water as their water sources were drying up. And we needed to help to build their specific resilience to climate change. Yet gender-based violence was preventing them from participating in a meaningful way. You know, Manorama's already mentioned that jealous husbands might stop their wives from going to meetings, or if they started to earn income, they might beat them up because they were jealous that they were earning more income than they were. And so we needed to tackle this. Despite the fact that personally, you know, coming from a conservation background, I didn't know very much about it, but it definitely felt like it was the right thing to do. And I have to say that personally, I have learned so much from colleagues in Nepal, from Care Nepal, and other organizations in Nepal, from FECOFON, on, you know, how to tackle this. So for me, it's been a real learning journey as a conservationist. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And the humility of our growth, right? That we come in thinking we know, and then, you know, taking pause and really reshifting our thinking to address some of the social norms that are shifting in our communities. So Manorama, from your vantage point, what social norms have you seen change over this program?
Well, there We have conducted some research study, and also we have interacted with the community. And from that, what we sense is like social norms are gradually being changed, because some norms are very hard to like change within a certain period of time. So we can see that some norms like women's, participation, their involvement in community roles and political roles are like gradually being increasing. So some of the women are empowered in the project, have been already elected to the local government office. In the local government. So and also in community forests also, you can see there are lots of women who are effective leader in the executive committee. So, and also there is acceptance of women in the forest management is also being gradually increasing. So now you can see many of women only manage forests as well, community forests as well. So earlier it used to be think like it's only job of men, that they have to like be in decision making level. So now they are being also, women also are being accepted. And similarly, the gender stereotype is like in a conservation area also is like it's breaking down. Like for example, some conservation activities like forest fire control, or you can say forest patrolling to control illegal collection and trading of forest product. That is the job of that used to be considered as job of men only, but now we can see so many women's participation is increasing, and they are like involving in a group, and effectively they are managing those kind of thing. So, and similarly, so you can see some redistribution of traditional gender roles also. These are also gradually being changed. Sometimes men also like do domestic chores just to send their spouses to attend meeting or community level activities organized by community forests. So, and also you can see that, and there is women's involvement in income generation activities. Like earlier, it was the men who used to consider as a breadwinner of the family, and women are not allowed to like participate, step out from the home, or they are not expected to engage in income generating activities. But now we can see through the green enterprises, or there are lots of options, provisions in community forest management itself. So through those things, they are engaged in income generating activities. So gradually they are being also economically independent as like men. So these are some of the gender roles that are being gradually changed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Manorama. Mr. Lamsal, we have a question for you. The Ministry of Forest and Environment has developed a GESI strategy and action plan. From your vantage point, how do you think this will help to tackle gender-based violence in natural resource management sector?
Thank you. Since we are discussing on the achievements of the part of the achievement of the Hariyo Ban program, first of all, I would like to thank the Hariyo Ban program and the people of the United States for having such a good program, and we are still implementing it. And the Ministry of Forest and Environment is the important partner from the government. So, is my voice heard? Can you hear me? Okay. Let me start with the diversity of the communities in Nepal. So we often say that diversity is very beautiful. So that is very much true. But when there is a discrimination, and when there are discrepancies, and when some are strong and some are very weak, and when there are some inherent social problems, then sometimes diversity creates injustice, and in that injustice, some weaker section of the society may suffer. So since we are involving in the management of the natural resources, the equity, the justice in access to natural resources, and equity and justice in controlling the decision-making process is very, very important. Since there is a weaker section of the society, and since some of the section of the society is very strong, and there are inherent discrepancies there, discrimination there, then the involvement of the weaker section of the society is very, very important. And involvement of women, and that comes there. And women are actually, I consider, they are weak in terms of kind of in the household business also. They are very weak. They are overloaded with their household activities, and they have very little time to go outside and to participate in the meeting and to decide something and to go to the market, for example, to have some economically income generating activities. So this is very, very important. And there is another section of the society which traditionally in Nepal were actually discriminated, excluded, socially excluded, and some of the communities, they are isolated in physically isolated. For example, if there is a river and there is no bridge, and they are isolated and they have no access. So yeah, so altogether, the importance of having equity and justice and participation comes there. So when it comes to the formulation and implementation of the gender and social inclusion strategy in the forestry sector, actually Nepal's forestry sector is one of the subcomponent of the whole national system, whole government, you see. And I can tell you that the forestry sector of Nepal pioneered the gender and social inclusion strategy in 2009, when none of the other sectors had gender and social inclusion strategies. Because the participative forest management system in Nepal was institutionalized long before that time. And the policymaker and the field worker and our important program partners like Hariyo Ban Program, WWF Nepal, they thought that the participation, equity in participation, inclusion is very, very important in the natural management sector. And our forestry sector, Ministry of Forest and Environment, and together with our supportive partners, we prepared gender and social inclusion strategy in 2010, and we implemented it. There were some positive points. So part of the strategy was implemented, and part of the strategy we could not implement them. And after we were having important programs like Hariyo Ban Program, as you heard in the presentation, Hariyo Ban Program worked in the field with the communities, and they also supported us in the policy level. So there were feedback from the field, feedback from the community, feedback from the program, and the policy makers, they were very much convinced to update the old 2010 strategy and have the new one. Now we are this is yet to be approved. Actually, it is in the final stage. I would say, and this may be new to jury, and within a couple of weeks we'll get it approved. And one of the objectives of this new GESI, gender and social inclusion strategies, is that that is focused on making forest and environment sector free from any kind of violence and discrimination. So that is focused. That is the beauty of the new strategies. And so with this strategy, along with this objective, so what we want to achieve is we want to make a critical mass of women working in the forestry sector. You see, traditionally, forestry sector was not friendly with the women, because it was predominantly there were predominantly men, because we need to work in the field. Sometimes we need to work in the night, you see, and the female members, they actually did not like, initially they did not like to join the forest sector. Now, so we are having more and more female women workers there, and in the field also, like our forestry sector program, it was very interesting. It is very interesting to note that our forestry sector program was able to intervene the forestry program, and which raised leaders, activists, natural resource managers like Bharati Pathak. You already hear from you. She is also one of the product of the community forestry. So you hear in the introduction that she has been with the community forestry for more than 25 years. So this is very, very important that the forestry sector strategy that we are going to implement it. We are going to approve it. The ministry will approve it within couple of weeks. It will, when we revise our acts and regulations, we'll make it gender friendly. We'll make it women friendly. So we'll make it. We'll try to include those sections of the society which were discriminated in the past, and there will be equity and there will be justice in access to and in control of the natural resources. And while preparing the budget also, the government and also the supportive programs, they need to focus on the gender and social inclusion issues. And also the equally important is institutional development. When we are strengthening our institutions, we need to take care of the gender and social inclusion issues. Of course, there are other government acts and regulations that supports participation of women in the forestry sector. Whole government sector, for example, 33% of the women among the seats when there are 100 vacancies in the government, so 45% of the seats will be allocated for the women, Janajati, Dalit, and other excluded people. So if you consider 100 now in that 45%, 33% will women will get their 30% seats. So after implementation of those kind of rules, we are getting more and more number of female officials in the ministry, and we are getting more and more women activists in the forest sector. And so we are in a way to build to make a critical mass of women in the forest sector, so that the women become confident, they feel themselves bold, and they feel also not only mentally, they also feel physically strong when they are in number, for example, and that naturally reduces the violence against women. So that is one thing. So the strategy contributes to reduce the gender-based violence. That is one thing. And other thing, at the same time, we are also sensitizing our staff, sensitizing our program members for the gender-based violence. How can we eliminate it? Like, how can we, for example, create decent and safe environment for women from field to the governments? So these ways, the forestry sector strategy can help to reduce gender-based violence in the natural resource and environmental sector. Yes,
Thank you so much.
I can stop this time. Yeah.
No, appreciate it. We are getting so many questions. I'm actually going to maybe shift over to the questions that we are receiving from our participants. Let me see. So first question is to Manorama. You mentioned a positive correlation between an increase in women's income and reduced gender-based violence. Are there any studies that you have done in this activity, or that CARE has done overall to identify this correlation or the relationship between women's increase of income to reduced GBV? So if you can just explore with us a little bit more on the relationship that you've talked a little bit about regarding economic empowerment and reduction of gender-based violence.
Thank you for the question. Actually, we have not conducted any specific study to measure this, it would be, I think, interesting to like conduct study. But based on our experience, we had interaction with the the women in the community level, and are based on our observations and other findings. So this is what we sense that, like, for example, if woman is economically empowered, if she started to like generate money, and through the green resources, green enterprises, or other entrepreneurship, so we saw that, we noticed that her self-confidence is raised, and she get more involved with the community activities, and it also like help with I think it's connect her with the to raise boost her like confidence level, and she having like a freedom of economic, and maybe she gets to like get confidence to deal with gender-based violence issue also. This could be that linkages, but we have not conducted any formal study on it.
Thank you. So another question is around men and engaging men and boys. Are there some best practices that you used in Hariyo Ban for engaging men as champions to reduce gender-based violence? How were men engaged in this program, and how did they respond? And are they contributing to the sustainability of the work? I think I can give that to Manorama and Judy.
Okay. Judy, would you want to go first?
No, you carry on. You carry on.
Okay. Regarding men's engagement, yeah, we had engagement in various forms. Like we nominated GESI champions at the higher level, and also we nominated change agent in the community level, and some of the men are as a local resource person. So in various form we use it, and sometimes we also like tested one model couple for men and women. So that is how we engage men. So it helped because men are not only sometimes men are considered as a perpetuate of gender-based violence, but they are also with this experience, what we believe that they play crucial role in women's empowerment, because it made them to like other men to convince, and when we train them, and they also like realized and reflected themselves, and they motivated to empower women. We have got number of case studies documented on this, so soon we are going to publish it. So we have documented that men were like playing crucial role in empowering women, and also they supported in community forest management, also in an executive committee to to perform their roles. Like for example, if in executive committee, if committee women are like in secretary level, so they have to conduct some specific roles and responsibility. So for that also we found men like supporting them, and also convincing the family members of the women who are where they are facing gender-based violence. So these are the areas we noticed that men's engagement was very crucial in reducing gender-based violence. Judy, would you like to add more?
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, I think a lot of men champions came from conservation organizations. I remember talking to colleagues, who couldn't understand why should we work on GBV. They were maybe concerned about the issue, but how is it linked to conservation? So talking through those linkages so that that understanding was built. And then some of our colleagues from conservation organizations became really great men champions, and Mr. Lamsell too. I think you're a wonderful champion. So I think just talking things through, certainly with my own colleagues, and some of them became really good champions. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question I have is for maybe for Bharati. How did you train staff on gender-based violence sensitization and awareness? And and Mr. Lamsell, you also talked a bit about this as well. How is that? How did you train them on gender-based violence? How are you training them, maybe?
Thank you so much. Question again. FECOFUN, you know, is the FECOFUN. Sorry. FECOFUN is the very women-friendly and gender-friendly organization. We are very closely work with the users group, and similarly, we will sensitize our staff in the inside the FECOFUN secretariat and all over the country, where is our branch office. In the province level and district level and local level. So firstly, when it comes to our staff, when joined to this staff, our office, that time, starting time will about the gender issues and the policies for the FECOFUN, how is the our constitution, what is the mandatory for the policy, specific focus to the women's and the other marginalized group focus, and the very sensitive cases will about a sensitization and orientation to our staff inside the FECOFUN. As not only FECOFUN, our staff will mobilize our campaign gender against the gender-based violence. So all over the country and the CFUG level and the other movement. So after that, and our staff learn to the more things, not only like a professional, and they will be realized the grassroots women cases and the marginalized group experience and the more traditional practice in grassroots level, and what is the challenge facing the community groups and the women's group and marginalized group, that issues took and realized our staff also, and they will be seriously think and make a plan, an implementation plan, and make a strategy, and make many changing the many policies in the forest sector and the natural resource. And that time our staff and our board and our all leader very clearly contributing to the gender issues, and how can reduce the gender-based violence, how is the issues, how is the facing the challenge in the community groups and the women. So firstly, we will award and we will discuss our policy, not only FECOFUN policy and constitution, and our government community forestry guideline already highlighted to the women empowerment and the marginalized group issues and the opportunity. So and the Forest Act also, you know, is our Forest Act allocated to the CFUG income in the 50% resource allocated to the women's empowerment and enterprise, and that types of the community friendly, women friendly, and marginalized group friendly policy we will exchange to the staff and board and other. So and that will be very helpful to the implementation phase and the policy implementation and our program implementation and project implementation itself realize, and a reflection to the staff and board in the FECOFUN. So this is the our policy, and our constitution also given that opportunity and mandatory for the learn to realize and reflection, and how to take ownership, and how can reduce the gender-based violence. So we are starting time, you know, is the FECOFUN is established in 1995, and we are very sensitive, and the women representation, we made a policy 15% women is very necessary, our committee all structure, and not only is the committee and the vital role. So that types of the very women friendly policy need to award our staff also, and they will be go to field, and they will be given to the information to the community, and they took a community voice and the women's voice and the grassroots women voice in the policy making process. So that is the role are playing to from PECOFON to staff, and not only staff in board and others stakeholder also. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lamsal, do you want to also respond around training gender-based, around the sensitivities for gender-based violence and training?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your question. So we are sensitizing the staff. The code of conduct on preventing sexual exploitation and abuse and its orientation. So whenever we have our training programs, orientation programs, so we include one of the session in that. And I think that this is a kind of movement for which men and women, we need to work together. And so we know that when it comes to the gender-based violence, the female part, they have more suffered from community level to the statistics level. So we need to work together. And let me tell you, in the government forestry sector also, so there is a critical mass of female foresters these days, and they are actually working together, and they are persuading the male counterparts to work together to work against this violence. And some of the things, for example, infrastructure construction, for example. So if there are no ladies toilets in the Ministry of Forest and Environment, if there is one, so they can they are fighting for it. And I would say that, and I would encourage that men and women counterpart, they need to work together. And you can see, I am a male and gender and social inclusion focal person in the Ministry of Forest and Environment. So in each office, in the districts, in the region, we have gender and social inclusion desk. And we are encouraging all the staff to discuss it, to discuss gender-based violence, what are the problems, and how we can work together to eliminate them. So I would say that we are at the initial stage, but if we look at the direction we are heading, for example, last year and this year, so I can certainly say that we are heading towards the right direction, and I can certainly say that we'll move further away in the right direction in the coming years. Thank you.
So there's one more question for you, Mr. Lamsal, before you mute yourself. How do you see the empowerment of women and reduction of gender-based violence contributing to economic outcomes for the forest-dependent communities? So again, how do you see
I would
the
say
empowerment? Good. Yeah, please go ahead.
Empowerment. You know, I perceive it as a kind of multi-dimensional thing. So you can talk about economic empowerment, you can talk about legal empowerment, social empowerment, and there are many dimensions. And when women are really empowered, when they feel really strong, for example, so they work more. When people they feel more strong, you know, men and women, if they feel more empowered, they feel themselves powerful and they work more. There is no actually there there is no it's called door, you know, they don't have to take fear of anybody because they are working together. So empowerment means making people powerful. So power actually that comes from inner side of a person. So if there is no violence, if there is justice, if there is equity, then you know power starts to build within an individual, and you know that way you know we can empower women and we can empower men.
Thank you. We have a lot more questions. I'm going to try to get to at least two more before our closing. So this is for maybe Manorama or Judy. Are there any examples you could share of persistent barriers to engaging women in alternative livelihoods and how the project worked to overcome those barriers?
Manorama, can you think of examples?
Right now, I'm out of the examples. So I was hoping if you could think any.
Persistent barriers in livelihoods. Well, I mean, I guess one thing is investment often is needed for livelihoods. So if people don't have capital that they can invest, that can be a real barrier. The way that we got around that as much as we could was often with having revolving funds in community forest user groups. They'd set up a cooperative that would manage a revolving fund, but we didn't always have enough money to go around, and I think that was a challenge. People are very resourceful. So, for example, for community groups where we didn't have enough money to give everybody revolving funds, the CLAP groups were very resourceful. So they would save their money from their snacks, for example, and create a tiny little mini revolving fund, and it might be $50, but that was enough to, and they would lend it to one woman, she would pay it back, lend it to another woman, she would pay it back. And that was enough to help that group of women, get on their feet and either pay off debt or develop new livelihoods, maybe buy a goat or develop a kitchen garden or whatever it took. But I would say that was one of the main barriers, was people having enough funds to sort of make that initial investment. So we got around it in some ways, but obviously our funds were limited. But people were resourceful. They also found ways. Thank you.
And another could be, I just remember one. Yes, Lamsal sir.
Can I add? Can I add few more barriers here? So with just to add on what Judy has said, I would like to add some physical barriers, economic barriers, and social barriers. If there is some obstacle there, and that obstacle is preventing the communities, women, and the weaker section of the society to participate in the decision making and control and assess, that is called barrier. And so there are social barriers also. Some barriers they are created by our society. There are inherent barriers. And in Nepal, sometimes there are religious barriers also. There are some religious minorities also. And sometimes those religious minorities, they are not allowed to, like, they do not have equal right as the majorities. And there are some ethnic barriers, those kind of barriers I would just like to add from our field perspective.
I think, Manorama, you might be able to answer the next question, which is around the connection. How do the community learning and action centers, or the CLACs, and anti-GBV units connect with existing GBV coordination mechanisms in Nepal and frontline GBV service providers? So really, how did I think the question is really trying to understand the referral systems and the connections amongst all the GBV stakeholders as it related to this activity.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. Community Learning Center, CLAC, it composed of women from the marginalized community, around 20 to 25. And they work together. They have in past also, they have been in present also, some of them are still working together to address the issue of gender-based violence. And if they encounter, if they got reporting about gender-based violence, maybe domestic violence or sexual harassment or other forms of violence in their community, and they will work together. First of all, what practices is there is they try to like address it within their group through mediation or facilitation skills. And if it goes beyond their capacity, then they turn it to the, refer it to the, sometimes they take it to the local government. We do have kind of body, judicial body for to address the gender-based violence. So sometimes they take to there and also to the security police to they facilitate them, and sometimes they refer that to facilitate them to go to the legal remedy also. So that is how they are working. So they don't try to address address or settle all the issues they receive.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could jump in there too, I think also during the CLAC meetings, if there was a case that where Hariyo Ban facilitators couldn't help, they would refer them to maybe GBV NGOs, specialist NGOs who were specialized in this and who could give specialized advice.
So Judy, a question that has come up a lot is just around the challenges. So we imagine that there must have been plenty because you're really, innovating here in this program. What were the top 3 challenges that you wish you would have known about before starting the activity, and how did you look to solve those challenges?
Okay, yeah, there were very many challenges. I think for me, the first challenge was understanding that we might be putting women at increased risk of GBV through project activities as women came to play more prominent roles. And this was a huge revelation to me and really kept me awake at night. It really worried me. I think our strategy for this was understanding the problem better through GESI analysis, and then developing a broad strategy to tackle it on many fronts, as Manorama explained. And then I would say a second challenge was that we didn't really understand that there were different types of GBV at different levels, society and household and in the user groups. And we were operating at the user group level, so it was difficult for us, for example, to tackle problems at a household level where we weren't working. So our strategy was to sort of work at multiple levels, to bring in other organizations, like I mentioned before, to help if we didn't have that expertise, promoting both the preventative and curative measures that have been mentioned, working with multiple partners, and learning a lot from CARE. I mean, as a conservation organization, it was so valuable to be working with a development organization. And then I think the third challenge was something that I've already kind of mentioned, was getting conservation staff to understand that GBV was linked to community conservation and that we needed to tackle it. And once we sort of talked through the linkages, people understood it better, and some actually became GESI champions themselves. So, I think a key to a lot of this is talking to many different groups, many different levels, increasing our understanding. And I understand now that the USAID mission for projects that are starting now, they will do a GESI analysis and identify the gaps, and then they'll develop a strategy and action plan, which the second phase of Hariyo Ban actually did. So I think in our second phase, we were in such a better position to tackle GBV than we were in the first phase. We were really starting out and feeling our way. In the second phase, I think we were much better set up with that GESI strategy and action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. There is so much that we can learn from you all, and this has been such a great conversation to hear the different stakeholders and the different ways that you overcame challenges and the way that you all are continuing to work on gender equality, and primarily to also focus in on gender-based violence. I want to give you one last opportunity. We're 1 minute over time, but really quickly, rapid fire, meaning one sentence, and do not make it long. The question is, If you can tell your colleagues in your field why it is important to address gender-based violence in environmental programming, what would you say in one sentence? So I'm going to start with Mr. Lamsal.
This is related with the morale and confidence who really work in the field. So we need to fight against gender-based violence.
Thank you. Bharati.
Yeah, female in forest sector are really vulnerable to gender-based violence as they have a work in forest. It is really necessary to sensitize and address the GBV.
Manorama.
If we are envisioning the conservation to benefit for both men and women, so it's very important to work in GBV also to address GBV. Otherwise, it widens the gap of gender inequality. So it's important.
And Judy.
Gender-based violence really helps to empower women to claim their rightful share of resources and play key roles in local conservation. So it's a really high priority for conservation organizations to take this up. Thank you.
Thank you all. Really appreciate your time, your energy, and most importantly, your commitment to addressing gender-based violence in the work that you all are doing. I want to hand it over to Kate. And again, thank you from USAID Washington for all of your work and for engaging in this really thoughtful and energetic conversation this morning. My morning, your evening. To you, Kate.
Great,
Kate,
thank
I think
you.
you're muted. Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you. It was a master mute. Thanks, everybody. I know we're out of time. Before you sign off, if you would do us the tremendous honor of just filling one last poll question, we would really appreciate it. The question is very simple. Do you think you learned anything here today in this discussion? How would you rate your knowledge now on how to work on gender-based violence and environment linkages in cross-sector partnership? And while you're filling the poll, we'll keep this open for 30 seconds or so. Let me add my profound thanks to yours, Che. First to you, actually, Che, and to USAID for your incredible leadership on this topic. We are so lucky to be on this path of learning and transformative action with you. To the partners of the Hariyo Ban Program, we are sincerely grateful to you all for joining us, and in particular, our four speakers today. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible insights and experience with us. I think we have a little background noise. Sorry for that. Okay, great. So we have, I think, quite some knowledge gain today. Thank you so much. And the last thing I want to say is for those of you who your question did not get answered, there were so many incredible comments and questions submitted during this webinar. We will take this into very close consideration in developing out the next sessions in this webinar series. If you have very specific questions, project issues you need to deal with now, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll do the best we can to either answer your questions, get tools and resources to you, or try to connect you with people who can help. And again, my sincere thanks. I hope that if you have not signed up to be on our listserv, you will. You can visit us at genderandenvironment.org/agent or /GBV-ENV. And again, thank you and have a lovely, safe day or evening. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.